This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, having technology, using technology, helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW.
We're in a really tough time, and people have to think about technology to help them to allow the staff that I'm actually doing, or the staff that I've actually got, can deliver a lot more for the price that you're paying for them.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Helping create and build someone else's vision is a unique position to take in the hospitality game, because most operators are family-run businesses who become jack of all trades to get the engines running in their own venue. But there are some that, after years of running their own business, play a huge role in helping others fulfill their dreams. Craig Macindoe is the owner of Darling Crackles. Craig, how are you?
I'm very good. And you, Huck?
I'm good, mate. It's good to get you on the show. We've both been around for a little while and you've done many things. Tell us about that transition from owning your own venues into sort of helping people create their own.
Well, I mean, it's always been something that I think the real transition happened sort of, I remember this, I had this moment, I was, 42, and I'd just done a 14-hour shift where I'd basically been to the markets in the morning and I was finishing up at night. This is when I owned Moo Moo Grill, and I had 3 kids, and I just was thinking, wow, this is just not really sustainable for me. You know, just to be sort of pounding the kitchen the whole time. So I initially, when I opened Moo Moo Grill, we started, and it was like right smack bang into the global financial crisis. So I had everything on the line, and I had to learn how to market my own business, and I became really passionate about that. And so 2 things. The first thing was I realised that owning my own restaurant and just being there all the time was just not good for my family life. And the second piece was that I just really wanted to help other people.
Well, I want to explore sort of all the sort of projects that you do and what that is like working with different people to sort of build their dreams. But take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family growing up?
Look, I have this story. My father was like the world's worst barbecuer. In fact, he was legendary for the black sausage. And so really you kind of had to learn how to cook because my dad was such a bad cook. So, yeah, that's really how food sort of started in my mum was a great experimental cook, but my dad was so bad. So whenever mum was away, you had to sort of learn to cook for yourself because, otherwise you were going to end up with charcoal sausages.
Well, what were the first sort of steps into a career in hospitality for you?
Well, I started off actually, I was a bartender at Minsky's, which I don't know if you know. I was a bartender there when that was a real sort of pinnacle place. It was Danceteria next door, and it was Minsky's was like this high-end cocktail bar, and we all wore bow ties, and it was a great place to work. And then I moved on to work at Cafe Royale, and that was a fantastic sort of high-end cocktail bar in Neutral Bay. And I ran into the guys from the Hard Rock Cafe, of all places. And when they were coming to Sydney, and that was kind of going to be this amazing place. So I went and saw the general manager of that, and he said to me, "You'll learn the most about restaurants by going in the kitchen." So I went, swapped over to the kitchen, and then I opened the Hard Rock in Sydney, the Hard Rock in Maui, and from there I sort of started doing a bit of consulting. I opened And then I sort of started working in sort of very smaller places, but then I opened Kingsley's Australian Steakhouse and, built myself a little bit of a consulting career. I'm sort of missing a few bits, but I've owned the tasting room and I've owned catering companies and had Moo Moo Grill and the Barking Frog and, a whole lot of different venues along the way.
Well, let's go back a bit. Take us to the Hard Rock. Like, do you have any stories? I remember when that opened and what Sydney was like at that time. Do you have any stories of the challenges and what that was like?
Well, I think the challenges for that was that it was just always an American brand coming into Australia. So, I mean, apart from just having hundreds of staff that they had to employ, I think the only real challenges for them was that they were trying to work out, okay, how do you make a hospitality venue work in Crown Street, right? It was like this kind of, when it opened, I remember thinking, oh my God, like how is this going to work? It was like right on Crown Street, there was no parking. Anyway, I mean, it had a few really good moments, and we had great times there growing up. I mean, I remember I had a 5-bedroom house in Bondi, and I think we had 14 people living in it, just all staff from the Hard Rock. And so it was, and I travelled around the world with the Hard Rock, so it was fantastic. Fantastic.
You kind of briefly mentioned some of the businesses that you have opened, from New Orleans Cafe to Moo Moo Grill and the tasting room in the Cross. Take us back to that. There was a tiny little place in a back street on Kellett Street in the Cross. What was it like pulling that together?
Well, the tasting room was really interesting because we got it kind of came out of a consulting job we were doing on a cafe in Harris Street, and the guy owned a bit of property in Kellett Street in King's Cross, and he owned it with the Master of Arms of the Comancheros, and we didn't know that at the time. And he went in. He said, "Oh, look, here's this space, and it's fully fitted out." And so we went in there and decided, okay, well, let's do a tapas bar, like a little bit of a tapas bar. The tasting plates were really just sort of starting to come to the fore, and we managed to recruit Will Merrick, who now is in Indonesia doing great things. He's got quite a number of venues, and also James Constantides, who is so he was famously Jimmy the Greek, and he had he had a place called Not Water on Sundays. And, they're two really talented chefs, and we just had this... And then we had this very talented Spanish bartender, Manuel, and it just ended up being a cocktail bar and tasting room in King's Cross, and it was actually a fantastic venue. Like, I really loved it. It was great for your creativity. It was just the real start of that sort of small plates situation, but it did come with its own set of... I remember going back in there at 6:30 in the morning, and the place was still open, and half my staff had were in various states of undress, and I had to sort of shut the venue and kick everybody out. I remember we used to open the bar, which was in the back, which had a door out the back alley, and basically the back alley was like an extension of our bar area until all hours of the morning. It was a pretty wild adventure.
You mentioned working with Kingsley's and getting that off the ground, but you ended up opening your own steakhouse, Moo Moo Grill, over on the north side of Sydney. Well, why did you choose that location and that sort of idea?
Well, at the time, I actually owned New Orleans Cafe. So I owned New Orleans Cafe for about 6 years, maybe 6 or 7 years, and I was always looking for something else, like another venue, and that was the Red Centre, I think. Yeah, the Red Centre, which was like a gourmet pizza place, and it was being sold, and so I took it over. I really, at that time I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce of Crow's Nest, so I had quite a few connections in Crow's Nest, and so it sort of made sense to have my second like, a cafe and then a restaurant in Crow's Nest. And I really liked the whole health aspect of grass-fed beef, and I really wanted to champion that. And so we did a grass-fed beef steakhouse. And yeah, it was fantastic fun for 8 years, and then I sold it. Well, I sold it later, but it was just one of those things where for 8 or 10 years, I met a whole lot of great people, did some fantastic cooking, like really got into the whole sustainability part of cooking. We, championed producers. I got to cook quite a bit with Ben Cooper from Chin Chin. We used to do single animal dinners where we would do, we'd do like a duck dinner in Crow's Nest, and then we'd fly down to Melbourne and we'd do the same dinner down at, he was the head chef at the time at St Ali, which is like a big sort of coffee place, but he was doing St Ali nights, and so we'd do single animal dinners together. It was right at the start of all that social media stuff, so I met a whole lot of chefs and people through social media. It was like the start of Twitter and all that sort of stuff. I remember I remember SBS Food put on a thing where you met all these people, and then as their Twitter handles, you had no idea what they actually looked like or were, but it was really interesting, because I would say, mine was very simple. I was at Chef Moo, so it was a very simple handle, but you had this, that was the rise of the food blogger and the rise of Twitter and food social media. So it was a really interesting time to own a food business.
Yeah, the experience of running restaurants, on the north side of Sydney and the south side, and anecdotally, there's a lot of talk about the difference between the people that live in those areas of Sydney and the restaurant offerings. As someone who's owned up restaurants in both, do you treat the restaurants differently?
I think you have to. I think you've got to think about, you have to be really careful of where you are and that you're not bringing so for example, I live in Manly now, and a lot of high profile people have tried bringing higher, more expensive places into Manly, and it just hasn't worked. And probably, you've just got to be really wary of your actual locals. So you've got to look after your locals. So you have to actually skew your business towards what's, like, for example, Moo Grill. If we'd had that in the east, would we have had that? It was we allowed BYO. So I don't think you would do that in the east, but you wouldn't survive in the North Shore without doing BYO.
Tell us about that switch. You mentioned about doing 14-hour days and wanting to sort of a change, but how did you make that shift into full-time sort of consulting? Well,
actually, what happened was I sold my business, and I actually had. As part of Moo Grill, we were part of this sort of group of people who were sort of learning all about databases and social media, and so I had quite a decent following. So my thought was that how I would get out of the steakhouse is I would start a home delivery meat business, and so I, as I was sort of working out, selling the steakhouse, I started doing home delivery meat. So I had something like 20,000 people on my database, and I ended up with quite a sort of a nice little home delivery meat business. And then I sold that a year later to a butcher, a large butcher. And then so I've kind of transitioned out of that, and I was working from home and just outsourcing a bit of outsourcing the butchery and having to do some of it myself. I had a friend who had a local kitchen, so I could do some of the cooked stuff myself. And then from there, I decided, what am I going to do? And a person I know was starting up Spice Alley. He was in property, and he said, "Oh, look, I think we've got some issues with some of our businesses in Spice Alley, and we're just about to launch a couple of other restaurants." So I went, and as a contractor, I did 2 years opening up Spice Alley, Olio, the whole rum store area, and getting some more venues into Spice Alley. So that was that was great. And we had some great international chefs that come in. We used to do four hands dinners where we'd fly in Singaporean Michelin star chefs, and they would cook with Lino, who's the head chef of Olio, or they'd cook with Stanley Wong, who was the head chef of Eastside Kitchen at the time. So that was a really great transition, because I kind of got to get out of owning my own venue, but I was still running. Well, I mean, I ended up running 18 businesses for Dr. Queck, who's the owner of Spice Alley, and then halfway through that, I was doing some work with Alex Adams and we were doing some Secret Foodies events. And we had a wine at one of the events, and Alex said, "Look, you're the smartest guy I know in digital media. Do you want to do a digital agency together?" And so I, the function ended, and I had a bit of a think about it, and I thought, that would be fantastic. Anyway, so I rang her up, and then we got together, and her moniker's Miss Darlinghurst, and mine is Crackles. So we decided to call ourselves Darling Crackles, and we do we fundamentally do marketing for hospitality venues, but because I've done Spice Alley and I've done so much consulting for other venues, I get picked up a little bit to do the opening of food precincts. So I helped Philip Keir do the opening of Verity Lane Market in Canberra. And that was a bit of a strange one, because we just started to get vendors, and then COVID hit. Anyway, it seems to be going quite well. And
well, tell us a bit about the Verity Lane, because for those that have never been to Canberra, it's a very unique proposition in Australia. Yeah,
I mean, he owns quite a bit of what's called the Sydney building in Canberra. Now, the Sydney and Melbourne building are the two oldest buildings in Canberra, and he took an old nightclub and basically hollowed it out and and what he does is he actually rents out small kitchens, little 15 square metre kitchens, to different chefs, and then he has the bar offering in the middle. And so it's great. It's got a pizza offering, a pasta offering, and then it just rotates. I think it's got Super Bow at the moment, but it's done the launch of the Enoki project, which is Gerald Ong. So it's a great testing ground for chefs, and just to have a look and see if their product is going to move in the market. But it's essentially a big hall. It was originally going to have a number of different areas, like it was going to have a restaurant upstairs, but I think he's realised that his best option is to have this big market where you can get your food downstairs, and then all the others upstairs he's got some entertainment, and he's just trying to get as many seats in there as possible.
When you're trying to help these sort of large precincts get up and running, take us through a project and how you help put it together.
Well, it really depends on what the customer, what the client wants. Like, for example, we're doing a place down in Canberra called Tiger Lane, and I got brought on board April last year, and at that point we had a few designs. We had a basic concept, basic sort of layout and so I help put the team in place to help deliver it. And so in terms of Tiger Lane, what I did was I hired a guy called Bila, who's the ex-GM of Trippus White, to do all the operations. And then we happened to be super lucky, and we got Sean Presland from the UK, and he's going to be the exec chef. We've now got Gerald Ong from... So we do initially we look at, okay, how is this going to be viable? We do some financial modelling for it. We then work with the designers to make sure operationally it works properly. And then we help with whatever the client can't do themselves. So, like, for example, pretty much in this one we've done the recruitment, we build the tech stack, We then advise on the point of sale and the operations, and then I obviously outsource the design and marketing to Darling Crackles, and then hopefully it all ends up as a success, which so far it has been.
Well, let's look at sort of the power and effect of marketing for restaurants. How do you transfer that to owner-operators and for them to get the best out of that?
So fundamentally, I think all businesses need to realise that it's all about your relationship with the customer. So it's now a situation where it's reasonably easy to collect a database, in that you can, if you have an online booking platform, you should be able to take out the data from that. And as long as you keep in regular contact with your clients, either through social media or through database management, then you should be able to make yourself run a successful business. Now that's all very top level, but if I walk you through it, so social media is one of those funny things that everybody is an expert at. And in fact, when I first started Darling Crackles, I was like, we're not doing organic social media. We're only going to do paid social media. But we get a lot of people who want us to do organic social media, so we do it. But the paid social media is the most powerful. In fact, we have some people who get 27 to 30 times their ad spend. Now that means we can create a piece of content, we can push it out and target people who have been to our website or people who are likely to eat at our venues, and we can, with $1,000 spend a month, we can, get $20,000 to $30,000 worth of bookings out of it. Now, obviously, there's bits of code that you have to write in it, and that's not easy to do. And then on top of that, you want to just make sure that you capture people's data so that when they come in to the venue that you capture their email address, and so that you can remind them either of birthdays or if you're having special events. And that should, if you've got some attractive events, it should drive your business along.
Technology for a long time was seen as the enemy of hospitality, and a lot of the industry sort of grappled with the introduction of it in all facets. Do you still find hurdles in your day-to-day when you're consulting in sort of that technology realm?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think we're right on the cusp of actually things being incredibly, technology for a long period of time was, you had a point of sale and you were like, okay, right, I've got my point of sale. And then you had your, whatever you were using for your time and attendance, whether it was just a manual sheet or whether it was something like Deputy or something like that. And now you've got a little bit of AI thrown in, and actually a lot of these programs now work together. And I think we're just on the cusp of things being really powerful and actually really delivering some real advantages to owning a business. When I was at Moo, you'd have a spreadsheet which you'd have you basically have all your separate programs, and then you bring them all into a spreadsheet, and then you would, and then at the end of the week, you'd enter them in your accounting program, and it was all quite a laborious situation. Whereas now you've got, we're using a program called Restock in Tiger Lane, where it's all on an iPad. Someone gets their opening checklist, they have to check off all the things, and they sign it, and bang, it's just in the cloud. And then you scan all your invoices, and AI then uploads it to your inventory, and then your stock takes. And then if that's integrated with your point of sale, it all, then you can actually do a proper stock take. And so all of a sudden you've got a situation where actually the technology is starting to work for you. So I think that is going to be incredibly powerful. And then you dovetail onto that things like Canva, ChatGPT, all those, and My Guest List and a couple of other programs, and it makes it a whole lot easier for people, owner-operators, to actually do it themselves. Like a Canva, like when I grew up at Moo, like doing your own graphic design was just unheard of. And now Canva is so easy, you can, you can basically just make a sort of template, and you can design stuff really quickly. And then you put a little bit of ChatGPT on top of that for, like, if you're doing your own, if you find that you're not a very good wordsmith, and then you can create an EDM in no time flat.
The list of startup businesses that you've helped get off the ground is far too long to sort of go into, but do you have any favourite projects that you've been part of that you can tell us about?
I loved opening the Hard Rock in Maui. That was fantastic. I don't think I was sober the whole time. That was, you just get so much. The Americans just look after the Australians so well over there. So that was fantastic. That was an amazing one. I loved getting Kingsley's off the ground. That was great. I think probably the tasting room is one of my favourite. Oh, the Nuns pull down at Shelley Beach was a husband and wife team, and they created a really great venue right at the Shelley Beach in Cronulla. They all have their own sort of Mossy Point. I've just done a consultancy on a kitchen down at a resort down in Mossy Point, which is just 2 hours outside of Canberra, and it's just right next to. And they basically bought the whole area, and then they've created a market garden, and they bought the neighbouring cattle farm so that they could have their own beef cattle, and so there's some really great things. People are really putting some decent money into some fantastic venues, and of course Spice Alley. I mean, I love Spice Alley. It to me was a great design, and it's just really is sort of that pinnacle of, at the moment, I think, of food precincts. It's quirky because it's got all the old 1800s houses, and then it's got the hawker market at the back. I love the vibrancy of it. It's great value. Yeah.
COVID was the curveball none of us saw coming, and as you know, had a huge impact on the hospitality sector. Given your role in helping so many businesses, what are the main pain points that you see in restaurants coming out of that and moving forward, and do you have any solutions for those?
It seems that we're kind of getting to a new normal in terms of, like, I think at the beginning of this year there was a lot of problems with finding good staff. The costs of everything were just going haywire. That cost volatility must just absolutely kill you, because you're sitting there going, I can't really charge more, but I'm, all of a sudden I've got a product that, we had cabbages for $40, I think, earlier this, so there was this yakiniku restaurant we're doing in Canberra, and, people are just ordering stuff, and, fruit and vegetables just going up and down. That has got to be killing. Because most venues, you struggle to make a really good living just if everything stays consistent, right? I don't have a solution for staffing. Just look after your staff, I guess. I think we're in a really tough time, and people have to think about technology to help them. And sometimes people are going to have to think, I'm going to have to get some QR code ordering, or I'm going to have to make sure that I really invest in my technology to allow the staff that I'm actually doing, or the staff that I've actually got, can deliver a lot more, for the price that you're paying for them. I think we've got a massive thing coming in robotics. So there'll be a lot of pre-chopped veggies, pre-done food, like basically pre-done food, and then there'll be a shift in people in robotics in the kitchen. I mean, there's an incredible shift in technology in the kitchen, which has been fantastic, like sous vide, all your programmable ovens, your like all that sort of stuff is just amazing. Your thermomixes, so you've been able to, you can make now what you never could make before, and so you've just got to be clever about that.
There've been a lot of restaurant precincts open in the last decade in sort of the capitals across the country. What's important in getting a precinct right?
I think I think the thing that you have to get the right mix of, you have to get the right mix of theatre and seats. Theatre and seats, because, so for example, you look at something like Spice Alley. We were very focused initially on the theatre of Spice Alley, but yet that's our number one complaint was the amount of seats. So you've kind of got to get you've got to get the right balance between the theatre you have there. Like, you can have a takeaway shop, but if it's all in Bain Marie's, it just doesn't have the same appeal. So you have to have some theatre in the preparation. And you see the most successful businesses are those that have theatre, and then you've also got to balance that with enough seats so that people can you can make some money off it.
Are there exciting opportunities that you see sort of happening that can help rejuvenate the industry?
I think there's a big, I think precincts are probably something that really can help the industry, in that you can have an area like where you can share the cost of the actual seating, and you can create really great quality food without the actual cost of all the labour. The other thing is that you're seeing that the higher end places still seem to be doing really well, but they are really bringing a lot of theatre into the experience. I mean, you look at Botswana Butchery with their meat covered in gold. You look at the guys from Elements who have now opened their fourth steakhouse, and they're doing all this sort of cooking, slicing meat at the table. The Sam Prince guys doing, smashed guacamole at the table, which I thought was, when I first saw that, I thought, okay, how exciting is this? But the amount of people who look at it and just think it's just fantastic is just incredible. So I think you have to have an element of theatre. So I think those in the sort of high end areas are going to do really well, because people are still going to really want that really high end experience. I mean, it's amazing how many omakase restaurants are opening at the moment. Like, just the actual 12-seaters, charging a fortune, but like just doing really great Japanese omakase. And then so on one end the really high end stuff, and then at the bottom end, not the bottom end, the sort of more communal dining, I think, is going to be the big future.
You made the switch from owner-operator to helping others get their restaurants up and running. What do you love about what you do?
I love still being in the industry, but not having to walk home at 1 o'clock in the morning. And also the thinking about your cool room at 1 o'clock in the morning, or I remember having, you might have the best business in the world, but it's still a possibility you'll get broken into. Like, I got broken into, I remember, at Moo Grill a couple of times. So you'll get a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning and you'll have to go in, or your cool room will go down. The cool room always seems to go down on Friday night. I remember actually one time our coffee machine didn't work, and it was New Year's Day. So this was 8 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Day, and I had to basically get my brother-in-law, who was a coffee roaster, out of bed, and he was still off his face actually from the night before, and we had to find a coffee machine and put it at 10 o'clock in the morning. Oh my God, and we were both sweating, and I don't think we got off the back of the coffee machine until 2:30 in the afternoon. So those are the things I don't miss. But but that's the great thing about actually being in because you can be. I think the hard thing in the hospitality industry is, as an owner operator, you kind of got to be jack of all trades, and really, what we say is like you just focus on making the customers happy, and we'll help you get them in. Because you can't be. We probably see new pieces of technology every 2 or 3 months coming in to try and to help, in the marketing space. And you need a lot of time to actually understand how it works. And so I think it's, so that's why I like Darling Crackles, because we can help people. Like we can make meaningful difference, but I don't have to, I don't have to be there at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Well, Craig, it's an honour to catch up with you and hear just a tiny bit of your story. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
All right. Look forward to it. Thanks, Huck.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.